Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Welcome to Detroit in Black and White. If you go to McShane's and mention that you watch us, they get you 20% off. And if you're one of those people that drink your food, you get 20% off. This is Detroit in Black and White, our Friday night edition. Jim Nardone, we're riding solo tonight.
We'll make it.
Hey, no question about it. What is your outrage of the week so far?
Well, I don't have an outrage. What I have is some information. I've been gone all week, so I've been kind of out of the loop. But I got home and I had the opportunity to watch a podcast. And this is a guy some people may have heard of. His name is Charlie LaDuff. The No BS News Hour, Chicken a la Queen, which was recorded, I guess, earlier this week. He had a pretty interesting guest by the name of Adolph Mongo. And there's a couple things that I thought really stuck out about the interview. And if you're watching tonight and you have an opportunity to go back and look at the interview that Charlie LaDuff had with Adolph Mongo, I think it's worth your time. A couple of things that were discussed, I think, are really important. And Charlie identified as an old school Democrat. He also identified Adolph as an old school Democrat. But he was talking about, I don't know if he was being specific, but he said they're not Democrats. These are pigs at the trough of the government who serve the elite. So you guys talked about, I don't know if you were talking about specifics or you were talking about Detroit or you were talking about politics in general, but another thing that the two of you talked about that I thought was really relevant was you mentioned you were talking about prosecution, you were talking about Kwame Kilpatrick and some of the other things that happened in Detroit, and you mentioned selective prosecution, and you talked about the media selective reporting. I think you should maybe talk a little bit about those things and tell us where you think they are. I think it's.
Example, we have a lot of stories. As a former newspaper reporter, I'm not a journalist anymore, I'm not a newspaper reporter. I'm just somebody in the media that make commentaries. But the media glossed over major stories, whether they inexperienced or too lazy to go after them. Kwame Kilpatrick had a navigator that he leased out, and it became a major story for 7, 8, 9 months. And at that time, I talked to the former disgraced mayor and said, you know what, this has been done before. When Coleman Young had a limo given to him by General Motors, and Coleman just told the media, screw you. He said, what y'all want me to drive around in a Pinto? And it was a 1-day, 2-day story. But this story never went away. Kwame couldn't explain it away. First, it was a vehicle for his wife and kids. Then it was an undercover vehicle, and then it became everything. He had 5 different people talking about it, and yet we have a mayor that was found out giving $300,000-$400,000 to someone that turned out to be his wife later on. And it was a one-day story, and not one person in the media wrote about it after that. And we get those kind of stories. We can look at the mayor's race, and you got some media outlets saying, "Oh, Reverend Kinlock doesn't live in Detroit. He moved here." But yet we had Duggan never lived in Detroit. It wasn't a story. Dave Bean never lived in Detroit and came and ran for mayor. It wasn't a story. But all of a sudden, it's a story. And you can look at the records of some of the candidates and say, "Oh, this person is an elected official, and hey, she missed all these meetings and tried to blow them off." And I wrote an op-ed piece, and I got the media calling me saying, "You must be working for another candidate." Fuck, why am I working for another candidate? I've been in this business a long fucking time. But this is the way the game is played. And this is and I say we don't have a fucking media here. The JOA was a joke. Somewhere down the line, one of the papers are going to be gone. When was the last time, Jim, you went out and bought a physical Free Press or a physical Detroit News?
More than 20 years.
Okay. This is what we was talking about. Yeah.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about what you meant by selective reporting, a little bit more clearly. I know what you're talking about.
If I don't like you and you get into some shit, all of a sudden everybody's reporting it.
So inaccurate reporting is what you're talking about.
Yeah. Now we looking at what's happening at Channel 4. Hank Winchester, the investigative reporter, is being investigated. What is he being investigated for? If there's anybody else, some of these reporters would have been writing about it. But it seems like nobody's saying anything. Hopefully, I guess it's nothing. Or is it something? If it was Joe Blow that whose house was raided, and if it was a Detroit police officer whose house was raided, they took his computers and all that, we'll have all kind of stories, not just a statement.
So if it was Scott Benson, it's an international story.
Right.
Hank Winchester, it's not.
Right. Right. When Charles Pugh got into his mess, it was a feeding frenzy. They was killing him. They was merciless. They followed him, and that was Charlie with the Detroit News. Followed him to New York while he was trying to work as a server at a restaurant. I guess it got him fired. So, yeah, it is what it is.
So let's say hello to our friends out there. G Money Hollywood saying hello, and hello to Day too. Karen Winston's talking about the president and his 747 from Qatar. Derek Henry, hello, Derek. Good evening. Karen Winston, Air Farce #1. That's kind of interesting. Felicia Dean, good evening to you. And Day, I am live now that Adolph's fresh on the scene live. I'm live now, Adolph fresh on the scene live. And Kwame was sorry, I lost that one. Dorian Denard, thanks for tuning in. G Money says, Kwame was a mayor that reflected the times what society represented. He was not that bad of a mayor. No Detroit mayor can hold a candle to Coleman, an honorary mayor, Marianne Mahaffey, I guess.
Well, we look at what's in the White House, and Trump has gotten away with a lot, and he has said a lot. And I'm wondering if this was Barack Obama doing the exact same thing, would the universities surrender? Would the media say, "Oh, you can do whatever you want to do"? No, I think it would be kind of different. And I came from that media where you have editors and publishers make those choices. It, they don't. For example, in Colorado Springs, Chappie James, the first four-star African American general in the Air Force, head of NATO, forced to retire because of heart problems. It stayed in Colorado Springs, had a heart attack and died. Guess how they reported the story? That he had a heart attack at home, and he died. Guess where he really was? He was at the home of a politician in Colorado Springs. Both of them was married, and he had a heart attack in her bedroom. But yet the media, boom, covered it up. The mayor of one of the mayors of New Orleans, and one of his consultants told me at the Super Bowl game, left the party. He was at a Super Bowl party. They get a phone call from a woman saying, "Oh, the mayor had a heart attack and died." They went over there. They dressed the mayor, brought him back to his car, and left it out front. And they went in back in the house, and then he got found out. This is how the game is played.
So what you're saying is, I mentioned this. I was out of town. It rained, and we playing golf up near Mount Pleasant. But I'm of the belief now that 95% of the media, or 90% of the media, is propaganda based, and I will even argue that the Weather Channel is propaganda based. They're trying to satisfy the people that pay them.
Well, but and I know the media always been. It's been about money. William Randolph Hearst, he basically started a war with Spain, saying that they blew up the Maine. I learned that in middle school. Come to find out, the real story behind the explosion on the Maine, a U.S. ship in Cuba, and it had engine problems or whatever, and it blew up on its own. We all know that North Vietnam did not attack America. The Gulf of Tonkin, it was some shit that President Johnson, he wanted to send troops into Vietnam, and he did it. George Bush said they had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He was trying to pay back Hussein over there, and that's what they did. So, but did the press here? Did they really report the story? Maybe years later. I was in Europe when George Bush, the young George Bush, slipped and fell, hurt his head in the White House. The newspapers in Europe said he was drunk. The newspapers here said he just slipped and fell. They didn't mention that he probably drank a fifth of bourbon or vodka or whatever, his choice of alcohol. Yeah. So
thanks, yes. Dorian, for your comment. I think the bigger challenge today is we don't give people information and let them make decisions on their own. We're not happy unless they believe what we tell them to believe. And to me, that's.
Didn't you spend the story when you was police chief? What was the newspaper in Trenton? Is that the?
It's the News Herald, Downriver News Herald.
Yeah, didn't you spend the stories and stuff? Didn't you have favorite reporters? Somebody called up. I know I was friendly when I covered the police and the various cities that I worked in, well, I can call. They give me a story. They tell me something that they hadn't released, and then I owe them one. And so something come down and you find out, and it can be embarrassing. You get a call and say, hey, man, you can you just move past that,
Well,
or
I will say this.
write it in a way that it don't make us look too bad.
I had a relationship with one of the assignment editors at one of the top 3 in Detroit. And I'll tell you why. I didn't try and spin things. I wanted an honest report out there. And when I wanted something honest, I didn't call Kim Craig from Channel 7. I'll tell you that.
Oh, well, is she still with Channel 7?
I'm not sure. But I went to the people that I knew they weren't going to tell an honest story and give an honest analysis of the event, regardless of whether the police were in the right or were in the wrong.
Well, I sat at a TV on a Sunday where all these pundits and reporters before this special election where Gil Hill and Joanne Watson faced off, and they was predicting Gil Hill in a landslide. Joanne calls me. It says they are predicting me to get beat up. I said, 1, they don't vote here in the city. And 2, they don't even know what's going on out there in the community. We've been out there for 3 months, and we know, and it looks good. And the polls that we took says that you're going to win. And guess what? Gil Hill had a big party down in Greektown, had 400 or 500 people. They were partying. By 11 o'clock, it was only Gil Hill and the Greeks left. Joanne, we have won.
But
So yeah, the reporters, they don't have a clue. And Charlie said, I told him that I saw Kwame. He told me he packed up his stuff out of the office, and he's leaving. He left the Manugian. He found a place. I called Charlie and said, well, the mayor vacated the 11th floor, et cetera, et cetera. He had a big argument with his editors and at the Detroit News, who says, oh, you believe that Mongo, he's a racist, he's this, he's that. That's not true, and all this other shit. They ran it anyway, and it turned out to be true. See, so and we got $10, $15 hour reporters now on at the news and the free press and at these TV stations, because they're buying out all the ones that have the big contracts. And a lot of these media types are going over to the city, to the county, to law firms, because they want to make more money. Press is dead, especially in this town.
So I had a story that I was, I guess I don't know if it's a great story or not a good story, but if we can go in a different direction, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
On Wednesday night show, one of our colleagues mentioned an event at a park in Detroit, and I believe he called it Valdez Park, which is incorrect. So I want to. The reason it struck so close to home is because it was a mistake, but it's called Robert Charles Valade Park. So the Valade family paid for this park in Detroit. It's on the river. Are you familiar with the park, Adolph?
Yeah.
So I think what we're missing here is the history. So our usual show is at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull. And next door to Michigan Trumbull is, for those of you that don't know, that may not know, I'm sure most everybody does, is a place that used to be called Navin Field, Briggs Stadium, and Tiger Stadium. But in the shadow of 10th Street and Michigan Avenue, I guess 100 years ago, there was a factory there. And this factory made clothing for railway workers. All right. This guy started this small company in 1889. So this is a long story coming back around to Valade, but here's what happened. He started making this clothing, and the clothing kind of took off. It was a small company. Well, I guess it would be daughter, granddaughter, maybe? No, daughter, granddaughter was a lady by the name of Gretchen Carhart, who was a lady that saved the Jazz Festival in Detroit. Are you familiar with her, Adolph?
No.
Gretchen Valade. Well, her husband was a guy by the name of Robert Charles Valade. And in 1949, he went to work for the Carhart Company when they were a $2 million company. And he turned it into a $300 million company. But there was a factory right across Michigan Avenue from, at that time, Navin Field. And that is Valade Park now. So I was just going in that direction. I don't want to lose that history. So Valade was married to Carhart, and that's what the park is named after.
Well, I like I like that kind of stuff. I like the history, and Navin was one of the owners of. Before that was Bennett Park or whatever. Tigers got a long history of having a ballpark right here. Tiger Stadium was one of the premier parks, and for whatever reason, we couldn't get rid of it because you had 5 or 6 people wanted to keep it up. Just like they kept the train station. Listen, we got stories.
But here's Gretchen Valade died in 2022, at the end of 22, and December 30th of 2022. She spent millions of dollars, and she kept the Jazz Festival running when it was going in the tank. But what's interesting about Mrs. Valade is she had a conservator and a guardianship issue that ended up in the courts, and it looked like she lost a lot of money somewhere in the process, like millions and millions of dollars, and it was big news.
That's too bad. We're gonna take a break, and we're gonna come back with our guest, LaRon Evans, mental health expert, and we'll continue. Detroit in black and white. We're minus the Queen Vanessa, and the Prince of the Democratic Party, the liberal wing of the party. He get mad because I said that. Allan Lengel be with us tomorrow. So let's take this break.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabria, your Wayne County Treasurer. If you're living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, the probate process can be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. Contact us at 313-224-5990 or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. We're here to help.
Welcome back. This is Adolph Mongo and with Jim Nardone. We have our guest is LaRon Evans. How you doing?
Hey, good evening, everyone. How are you?
All right. You are an executive and a mental health therapist, executive director for the Metro Youth YMCA in downtown Detroit. June is a special month. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you both for inviting me on the show. Thank you to Vanessa. I know she's not here today, but she asked me about the show. I just wanted to shed light on June as Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, as well as being a therapist. I've been in therapy, doing clinical therapy in practice, private practice for about 13 years. And I got drawn to doing therapy just based on a need, based on having therapy. So I'll give you some general background, about that. My parents got divorced when I was in college. And there was just some other things in terms of like just finding myself and what does it mean to literally go from like adolescence to pre-manhood to full adulthood and still navigate during those, during this time of college and understanding like myself and continue to develop, just like a sense of newness and want to be connecting with somebody, but not knowing what those thoughts were, not knowing what those feelings were, just knowing that I was growing. But even looking back at that time, I'm like, it would have been nice to like talk to somebody during that time. I did try and reach out to a therapist, and there wasn't a lot of male therapists, specifically Black male therapists. And sometimes there's a difference in terms of relatability, not based on either gender or race or class, but it's just about gender connection. Because my approach is person-centered, leading with empathy, unconditional positive regard for my clients. And I think that building that trust is important, especially if somebody's new to therapy. So I just want to come from an open, honest lens of shedding light on what June is, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And just to tap into people, whether it's one person or however many people on this call. If you are in therapy, great. If you are looking for a therapist, I'm just here just to provide some additional resources and hopefully for anybody just to make therapy a little bit less taboo. That's just the sole purpose of why I'm here this evening, just to create more of a sense of awareness, just in general. Even when we talk about COVID, I don't think none of us, at least me, for that matter, even my clients, got the full memo that COVID is completely over. We don't even talk about it, anymore. But even during that crisis, there were so many things and so many different ways that we were impacted.
A lot of people freaked out.
Yeah.
Not only died, but they freaked out. I remember as a student, undergrad, that there were several suicides on campus of male students. Why do males run from therapy? I say run because it seems like, you hear a story, somebody call you and say, so and so committed suicide, and you say, damn, he didn't look like he sound like he was depressed or whatever, but I guess it's suffering in silence.
Mm-hmm. I think what you just said, what you mean, I think that a lot of people in general, specifically men, because it's literally innate in us to feel like that we have to be leaders, providers, wear that cape. And it's hard to take off that cape. So if you're not doing that, then not only you're not trusting your own feelings, you're not self-aware in terms of what your feelings. And sometimes reaching out to a therapist, there's a sense of vulnerability, even that a lot of men don't have. Even if you are married or single, it's like it's given some type of autonomy, like, hey, something's wrong. You don't want to appear like there's something going on, or that you're weak, or that you have to reach out based on that. So we'll just mask it. That's essentially what we do. I'm a therapist, and for the average viewer who's on, you'll think that my life is well put together. But I'm here to even be honest about that. It's not. I have some significant losses in my life. My close best friend since 5 years old just passed from cancer. I had a divorce 2 years ago. These are continuous things that I'm healing from. But in terms of being person-centered, I'm coming from an open place of being honest. Even as a therapist, we are still human. One of my clients actually said, well, who is your therapist? Who's there for you? And I had to sit back, like, well, I probably need a therapist. And actually should probably get a shirt, like, who's your therapist? We have a doctor when we're sick. We have a dentist when we need to get a checkup. We have a trainer for physical fitness, but most often we don't have a therapist. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in crisis, but I want to talk more about what does that look like in terms of maintaining, like even with cars. If you look at it from that, there's a reason why you get your tires changed. There's a reason why you get your oil checked. You don't just want to go in where there's an issue. You want to go in there for general maintenance. And that's what therapy is as well.
I have a mental health question, but before we go to that mental health question, can you tell us a little bit about the life jackets?
The life jackets for the YMCA?
Yes.
They were giving that away through our Detroit Swims program. I'll talk a little bit about the YMCA just in general. So it's all about community health and community resources as well. So I do lead with all things community, and mental health is a component of it. Again, I'm executive director for the Metro Youth branch of the YMCA. That's primarily with our team programming. We're structured to work with high school students, and then with a specific age range between 14 to 22. So 2 to 3 years post high school graduate. We work with them as well in terms of workforce development through Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation, through Grow Detroit Young Talent, which is a paid internship summer program. We have a youth in government program for high school students where they actually have their own Michigan delegation, which a lot of people don't know about as well. And then we also have community initiatives, which are other branches within the YMCA, such as our Y Positive Sports Initiative, who do different sports activities in schools and around the community that you may see. We have our Y Arts department. They put on free programs. They actually just had a fest for filmmaking. They do different projects like that. And then what you mentioned, Jim, for the life jackets, they just did a life jacket giveaway for safety around water to make sure that not only kids, but adults are prepared, because a lot of people are want to be out on the water. You have to be safe. So those are different things that we do for the community year round.
What about what you said? June is what month? June
is National Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. But just in general, just to shed light, as you mentioned as well, and I saw somebody else kind of like chime in, not appearing weak, and just the need, I'm here from the lens of a male, a Black male, just talking about how therapy can be taboo, how it can be stigmatized, that you're, weak if you reach out. If we talked about suicide and things like that, and just masking what we may be feeling. And past what we're feeling, a lot of times you don't have to, as being a clinical therapist, you don't have to be schizophrenic. You don't have to be bipolar. You don't have to suffer from severe anxiety before you reach out to a therapist. We're trying to make sure that we are preventative care as well. You don't want to reach out to a doctor if you're having a heart attack, and you should if that's what's going on. But in order to lead up to that, you want to make sure that your levels are right, things like that. That's the same way you should look for a therapist as well in terms of setting goals and preventative care. Should something happen, we don't want to get to that point of considering suicide.
Well, the late great genius Sly Stone just passed away, and reading about him, he had anxiety problems, and the only way he could perform in public was self-medication, alcohol, drugs. If he had his way, I don't think he would have been the mess that he turned out to be. Nowadays, you the entertainer, I guess you got access to a therapy, but the average person in the hood or in the schools, and they don't get it, especially in a city like Detroit. Where they see all kind of shit that's going on in the streets, people getting killed, people getting hijacked, kids freezing to death in the cars. How do we prevent that? Answer that?
Yeah, I don't think it's a one answer or one show, end all. I think that for one, my lens is coming from just making sure that we spread awareness and connecting people to just resources that you may not think about. Even when you think about therapy, it may not be accessible for everybody, but there is services that are free out here. If you look for different therapists, there are sliding scales. If you're an adult, if you don't have a proper healthcare or insurance, and then using insurance just in general. A lot of people don't know that if you use your insurance, just like going to the dentist, in most cases, there's a small or limited or even no copay. But even that, somebody could be looking at a traditional therapist like, wow, I have to pay $200, $300 in a session just to see a therapist. I'm not even about to even consider it. So just even talking from that standpoint that one, yes, you can use your insurance. Two, when we talk about in school, reaching out to your school counselor is one avenue. When I first started doing therapy, I worked for Juvenile Assessment Center, and I did home-based therapy. So that was a service that was provided free of charge through kids who were court-appointed, but also there's other programs, as well that kids can access, and even adults, if you research it, or I can provide, some different links as well. But I would suggest like United Way 211. If you work with your employer, depending on what your insurance is, you can reach out to your employer assistance program, which is EAP. That's another avenue as well. But I will encourage everybody to make sure that we're using our resources, not just when it's an actual crisis, but even before then, just for general maintenance. Most of my clients literally are just normal people, just like we're talking today, just loosely, whether it's about politics or about goal setting or where they're at in life, just people who just want to be heard and seen. And that's a factor of therapy as well.
So it's I'm sorry. It's typically, if a young person is self-harm or harm to somebody else, I mean, there's a series of events that leads people up to desperation, right?
Absolutely.
So I think what you're trying to say is we want to get them before they're at the bursting point. And how do we reach that? What do you do if you're a parent and you have a 12 or 13-year-old kid, young adult, 15, 16 years old, and other than encourage them to get treatment? I mean, how do we identify these cases? Because there's a lot of kids that are busting at the seams right now, and it seems like they're not getting treatment.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, because even when I started out in juvenile care, there was different kids that I would talk to, or parents, like, hey, I'm getting them therapy. They should be okay. You should be there. They should be healed by now. And I would talk to even a parent, about what what's going on at home. They're like, all they do is sleep in their room. And I would talk to the parent, like, if those are like key indicators, if they're self-isolating, if they're writing letters that are, not atypical or something that they would typically write, and expressing themselves is good, but depending on what they're putting in that, it's okay to probe and to talk about it, to understand that you have a safe place to talk to me, even if it doesn't feel right, even if you hurt it, even if you had thoughts of suicide, even if you had thoughts of hurting yourself, I want you to feel comfortable to talking to me, because kids are no different adults in most cases. That we mention males. Why do we hide from therapy? Because we don't want to appear weak. And that's the same thing that kids can be subjected to as well with their parents. They don't want them to look at them like they're different or weird just because they may have anxiety or feel something like that. But as a parent, we want to make sure that we are identifying some of those concerns. Are you eating too much, not eating enough? If you're sleeping, too much, not sleeping enough.
Are you a proponent of medication?
I'm more holistic. There does come to a point of medication depend on what the diagnosis is. But I try and go, because a lot of kids typically that I work with, or just in years past, was automatically you see a therapist, and just because they're can't fully focus in school, they were automatically prescribed Ritalin, because for ADHD.
They still giving Ritalin to
like candy. Yeah.
Oh man.
It could be adjusted. It could be adjusted to diet, things like that. If you're eating too much, too much sugar content, something like that. These are different holistic things that we had to consider before any medication is prescribed, that I would suggest, at least first.
Well, what's on store for the rest of June? We coming to the end of June for Mental Health Month.
Well, it's a continuation. Just literally want to come on the show just to spread some awareness. I will encourage people to, if you're looking for a therapist, I always geared towards people to Psychology Today. It's kind of like the Facebook of therapists. You can look based on your zip code, insurance, sliding scale, whatever their prices are.
How to get a hold of you if they want to talk to you?
You can reach me.
Your program.
Yeah, you can reach me directly at www.ymcadetroit.org. You can look at our website for Metropolitan Detroit. Me personally, my personal YMCA email is LaRon, LARON .Evans, EVANS @ymcadetroit.org.
And you don't stop at the Detroit border. You're Metropolitan Detroit, so you are helping people all around Metropolitan Detroit. Is that correct?
Correct. So we're in Downriver, Farmington, Birmingham, Royal Oak. We're pretty spread out. Yeah.
Yeah. We get listen. You have an open invitation to come on anytime you got stuff going on that you want to get out into the community. Love to have you to come back. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. So hopefully I was able to share some resources. And again, I can follow up if anybody has any questions. Please reach out.
We need to get to these young people before it's too late. And, they don't arrive on a street corner in a bad situation. There's a series of events that get them there.
Yeah. At some point, I would even lean into talking about vaping. If I ever come back, that's another thing that's prevalent, in schools, how kids are coping with some anxiety and depression. They're picking up, putting down one thing of not addressing that and picking up vaping, which is a whole nother health concern or crisis.
No question. LaRon Evans, Executive Director of YMCA. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. Well, Jim, I was going to ask you, Jim, about as chief of police, did some of your officers, did you use therapists?
We did. We had a couple of people on speed dial that when we had challenges, whether it was, alcohol related, drug related, people, and just like LaRon said, Mr. Evans said, he's talking about going through his own challenges in life, and police officers, firefighters, engineers, everybody has challenges in life, and when you have difficult professions, those are heightened maybe, and it's when you talk about people getting treatment. Sometimes you have to force people into treatment.
Well, you know what? I just read one of the online publications where Donald Trump is pushing
treatment for himself.
Well, he don't think he's a nut. That people that's running for president should be taking some kind of mental and health test challenge. Well, I agree, because he wouldn't have passed. Biden wouldn't have passed. Do you think that people that run for office should be held to that standard?
I do not. I think you can vote for whoever you want, and you should be able to vote for whoever you want, regardless of their mental state.
I didn't vote for George McGovern because he picked a senator from Missouri, and they found as his vice presidential running mate, and then they found out that he had some shock therapy. This is 1972.
Thomas Singleton.
And they dropped him from the fucking ticket. I said, man, you can't even be loyal. The guy was, and they got their ass kicked. Yeah. So no, I
don't think the founding fathers, when they just, I don't think we can make a lot of excuses of why we don't want to vote for somebody. I don't think mental health is a good reason not to vote for somebody. Fetterman, what's his first name? I can't think.
Well, Fetterman was in a mental institution. Fuck, he won't put a suit on. He won't. Yeah, hey, listen.
I give the guy credit. He stands up whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him. He's gone to the other side and talked to the folks that a lot of people say you shouldn't talk to, and I give him credit for that. Whether you agree with it or you don't agree with his strategy, he's trying to lead. He's trying to lead from Pennsylvania. He's trying to do the right thing for his state.
Yeah, well, he's like Don Quixote. He's fighting windmills.
He had not only mental, physical challenges, right? He had a stroke,
Well, coming back to Detroit. Have you been paying attention to the mayoral race?
Have I? Yeah. I have not. Hi, True Sensation, our friend Karen Winston, Mr. 1213 probably, and Day. I have not. I've been hiding. Been out on a golf course for 5 days, so I know that there was some talk when you were on the show the other day about debates, and I think one of the news channels had a debate, Channel 4 or Channel 7.
Yes, Channel 4.
I think that we need to quit relying on debates and let the people running for office get out there and talk to the community, because we don't need that glossy, hey, look at me, I can tell you a story when I'm up here. I can say bad things about this candidate or that candidate. They need to be out in the community talking to the people that they're going to represent. This is not about them. This is about the community. And I think that's sometimes lost in these elections.
Well, I compare debates to appendix. Appendix are they're nothing. They don't serve a purpose, but they can kill you. You know, it can rupture. So that's why they take it out. A debate is you don't win an election on a debate, you lose an election on a debate. And I think Joe Biden lost the Democrats in an election on being incompetent in his debate. And people say, "Damn, the guy is forgetful. He looks like grandpa, and he shouldn't be running for president." If he would have skipped the debate and said, "I'm not debating you, Trump," he might have been the person that faced off in November, but he didn't. So I'm not a big fan of debates because they fake. You know, they pick and choose who they want to be. Just like this debate on Channel 4. Didn't have Todd Perkins, didn't have Fred Durham. In these polls, you never know how true is these polls.
But they're talking about each other. They're not talking about the community.
Right. And everybody talk about, well, you know, we're going to do affordable housing. That I can say that. You know, we need the meat of the plan. We want to get an analysis, in-depth analysis of how you're going to bring the neighborhoods back and how you're going to be part of fixing the school system. And like nobody wants to talk about, one or two might talk about what they want to do with the schools, but nobody want to make those tough decisions. And nobody wants to really talk about the bill is going to be due. How do you make the people that gave up their pensions, part of their pensions, whole again? Taxes. Listen, how you bring more people? Saying that you got 1,000 people moved in Detroit in 3 years. Boom. That ain't a lot of people. That's like Granholm saying Google's moving into Ann Arbor. It was 100 Google employees moved to Ann Arbor, but they made it. And I go back to the beginning. The media play a role in that and how they report that shit. You know.
Thanks to G Money Hollywood for his comment. I respectfully disagree. I just think that going down, I understand we shouldn't be electing mentally ill people to national office or the president of the United States. I don't disagree with that at all, but I think it should be in the hands of the people regardless. That's just my position.
Yeah, well, but you know, how do you get an insane person out? Listen, I was downtown the other day in Adelaide, and there's a young guy walking, and he was going crazy, talking to himself. He was angry, and people was getting out of his way. It's obviously he had a mental breakdown. So,
but we go back to the press, Adolph. If the press is not telling you that a presidential candidate has some challenges, if they're hiding things, the press shouldn't be hiding those issues. Right? We shouldn't be allowed to elect whoever it may be if they have mental illness. But when people are hiding it, when the press is hiding it, when the candidate's hiding that, when their campaign team's hiding it, that's where the crime is. It's not who people are electing.
Well, it's just like the media had a ton of information on Kwame Kilpatrick, party and etc. before he got elected. They chose not to run it. It's like a squirrel. They gathered their nuts and they waited for the winter to come, and then here they come. That's the media in Detroit. That's the media around the country. You know?
I agree. But I mean, going back to the voting, this country, even up till this last election or two, has has put a lot of effort in trying to stop people from exercising their right to vote. And I don't want to stop anybody, whether it's over a bottle of water or whether it's over paying a tax or taking an eligibility test to vote. Where are we going to end up? If
we had poll taxes. We had to down south where
literacy.
Yeah, they said recite the Constitution. All this other crazy shit that they threw up roadblocks to keep people from voting. Hell, we got folks here in Detroit that you can take a voting machine and put it on their front porch and they won't vote. You know, they won't vote.
I think when you start making those decisions to make it harder for people, it's an injustice to the whole country. It's
yeah. But that just hurts the people that go out there and vote. What do you have to do to get them to vote? To say, oh, you can't vote if you're Catholic, you can't vote if you're downriver. Oh, this election cycle, the people of Trenton and Melvindale, you got to sit out the election. People be up in arms.
I agree.
That's the only way. Then people are riled up. They riled up. Yeah, but you should be riled up anyway, and you need to go vote.
Thanks, Derek, for your comment. The real crime is a complicity. Karen Winston, it's a hard no on Mary for Karen. Edward A., our local media always highlights the worst of Detroit every chance they get. It seems like they carry those stories over and over again when it's something negative. I think you're right. I agree, G Money Hollywood. Mental illness making decisions that affect me and the general population are scary. I do, but if Durhal had passed over, I wonder if Durhal being passed over let the wind out of his sails. I like Durhal. I thought he was a very talented young man.
Yeah, I like Durhal too. But
this is obviously staged for Sheffield, and I'm not going to allow Horace to ruin our city. Day.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, she would be elected to the mayorship, Day, not Horace, but I understand that he'd have a lot of influence. He has a lot of influence now, whether his daughter is the mayor or not in this community, I would suggest.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So we go next week. We're gonna have a 1 whole month left for until the primary, and if it turns out a different way, the way the media said it was going to turn out, they're going to say the big upsets and stuff. But I don't think it's going to be any upsets. I think it's whoever get their people out to vote, their supporters, that's who's going to be the top two. So, if you can get those folks that's in the trenches and don't and feel that they have been looked over, etc., those are the ones that are going to turn the tide. These are the people that voted for Obama. Obama wasn't campaigning; it was a movement. People that didn't vote forever say, I have a cause to vote for. After Obama left, they left.
I think that's right. And I don't think they're coming back, a lot of them.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So, yeah, Obama brought a coalition together of all kind of folks. It's like when Feiger won the nomination for governor Democratic primary, he had people that was from everywhere, militia folks, Green Party people, liberals, conservatives, black, white, because Feiger spoke to, that's they like talking to Feiger.
So do you think there was a little, this is a interesting question. Do you think there was just a little bit of mental challenge in Jeffrey Feiger?
A guy brilliant,
I agree.
But you got to be a little crazy to do this shit. Yeah. You
I
know,
mean, would you really want to set up Jeffrey Feiger for a psychological exam to decide whether he should be the governor of Michigan or not?
No.
Or would you?
The same you can say about Rick Snyder or John Engler or Blanchard. Listen,
or Bill Clinton had some.
Blanchard.
I mean, I was subject to more than one psychological examination in my career. I'm not sure you would want to give William Jefferson Clinton a psychological exam.
well, as I said, the media, when Blanchard was in office, he quietly divorced his wife and married his secretary, and nobody ever wrote about it. So this is and Kwame had a fling, and you would thought that the whole world ended. And the same way with Clinton, and the Kennedys had every woman all over the country. They never wrote about it. 50 years after they both died? Yeah, so.
And G Money Hollywood's talking about top age. Well, there are top age requirements or classifications for judges in this.
Not all of them. You can be a federal judge and be 190.
I get that. I don't think that Bernie Sanders should be in the U.S. Senate, not because of diminished capacity, because
but he is. But he is. Well, anyway, we come to an end, Jim. Good show tonight. Your final thoughts?
My final thought is I'm looking forward to tomorrow's show. Who do we have on the show tomorrow?
We got you, me, Allan Lengel.
And we're going to be where?
At the Guardian Building. And you got to unveil your story you want to talk about, right?
That was my story, the Valade Park story, the history of Detroit and Carhartt. And, it didn't sound all that interesting. It sounded good on paper, but I'm not so sure it really played good.
Oh, well, I always like to know the historical significance.
To imagine Detroit in the early 1900s there with the Carhartt factory and where they are today.
Yeah, no question about it. Or that Henry Ford had a stake in the Dodge brothers, the Chrysler. They all was, making money off of each other. That must have been some exciting times.
I think Edward's saying that maybe Jeffrey Feiger and me are in the same category. We're both a little bit off center. You may be absolutely right, Edward. Thank you.
And people said that Winston Churchill was insane and that he was the right person to deal with the Nazis. And right after World War II, they voted him out of office. Said, okay, thanks, but we don't want you to lead us in
peacetime.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the Guardian Building, Detroit in black and white. I want to thank LaRon Evans, mental health expert, and all our faithful listeners and viewers. Thank you. The show couldn't be what it is without your participation. Thank you.